let's try again. Didn't click over there. Today we're going to be factoring trinomials, polynomials in general. Some of them will have 2 terms, some will have 3, some will have more. And you always want to check first to see if there is a common factor. So on page 71, I've picked out a few problems. Number 17 is the first one. And it says x squared plus 5x plus 6. And there are no common factors. So many of you use the old guess and check method here. And there's perfectly no reason for you to be afraid to use that method. Many of you factor this right away as x plus 2 and x plus 3. Well, that's great, because that's the right answer. So if you already know that, then you don't need to talk about this method that I'm going to talk about now. And some of you are really familiar with FOIL, first, outer, inner, last. So some fantastic math teacher came up with this other mnemonic device for factoring, and it's called MARF. Kind of like barf, but with an M in the front. And so MARF gives you a place to start if you don't know how to factor that. So I want to use this example and a couple more and show you how to use MARF. And MARF stands for multiply MARF stands for multiply, and then we're going to add or subtract the factors, and then we're going to regroup, and then we're going to factor, and then we're going to factor the groups, factor by grouping. So 2 factors, factor by grouping and factor. So I want to show you with this problem that we already know the answer to, how we would work that. So in the first step, they say multiply. And what they want you to multiply is the coefficient of the first term, if it's in standard form, and the coefficient, or the last number, which is a constant. So this would be 1 times 6 is 6. So we're looking for factors of 6. So we multiplied 1 and 6. That's our first step. Factors of 1 and 6 are 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. And so now we want to add or subtract a set of the factors that will give us this middle term, 5. So if we were subtracting, these would work. But both of these are plus, so we're not going to subtract. So we are going to use these. So this is going to be, instead of 5, I'm going to regroup and say this is the same thing as 2x plus 3x. So will you all agree that 5x is the same thing as 2x plus 3x? So I'm regrouping, so that's this step. Now I'm just going to rewrite the x squared and the 6. Now I can factor by grouping. So I'm going to take a look at these first 2 terms, and I'm going to see if there's a common factor. The common factor is x. So x times x plus 2 would be how I factor that. And then I'm going to take a look at the last 2 terms. So when you have more than 3 terms, you want to factor by grouping. So the common factor for the last 2 terms is 3. So I'm going to factor out a 3, and this would be x plus 2. Now this plus is pretty important. It came from there. Just be aware. Some of us have a habit of leaving things out, and then at the end, you're not sure where things go. So what happens now is, so I've done the factoring. Now I'm ready to factor again. But I want to see what's in common. You see, here's a term, and here's a term. Well, this factor is in this term, and it's also in this term. So I'm going to factor that out. So x plus 2 is what I'm factoring out. And so when I factor out the x plus 2, I have left this x, so it's x, and this plus 3. And so now you see that I factored that using MARF, M-A-R-F-F. back to number 19. Again, guess and check works, but if you're stuck, we would do 1 times 15 is 15. Factors of 15 are 1 and 15. 2 won't go into 15. 3 and 5. That goes into 15. 5 and 4 won't go, and 5's already on the list. So I'm finished with my factors. So this is the pair that I'm going to choose because I can subtract these to give me 5. And this time I'm going to subtract because there's negatives in there. In the first example, we were all addition. So I'm going to regroup this now. This minus 2 is going to be negative 5x plus 3x. And the reason the 5 is negative is because the 2 is negative. So you have negative 5 plus 3 gives me negative 2. So you can see that these two values add to give me the negative 2x. I'm going to rewrite the x squared and the minus 15. And now I can factor by grouping. So the common factor is x. So it's x minus 5. And the common factor for this one is going to be 3. And the plus is going to tag along. 3 times x minus 5. So now you can see that this term and this term match. So I'm going to write that down one time. And then the x and the plus 3 make the other ones. And so if you FOIL these back, you will get x squared minus 2x minus 15. So where we're headed with this is solving equations. In order to find out the solutions, we are going to need to factor these. Okay? So let's move on to question 31. This one has a leading coefficient of 9. So I'm still going to look and see if there are any common factors. This one is a 9, this one is a 9, but oops, we messed up, there's a 2. So no common factors. So this is a trinomial. So we're going to multiply 9 times 2, that's 18. Factors of 18 are 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. 4 won't go into 18, 5 won't go into 18, 6 is already on my list, so I know I'm finished. So the two things that I can add or subtract from this list is the 3 and the 6. That will give me 9. And I know that they're both going to be negative this time because of the way this is working out. This is going to be negative 3x and negative 6x to give me the negative 9x. Okay, so the 9x squared and the 2 come down. And now I'm going to factor by grouping. So the common factor here for these two is 3x. So 3x times 3x minus 1. And this one needs to be a negative because this is negative. Then this needs to be negative also. But the common factor is negative 2. This is negative, this is negative. So it's going to be negative 2 times what gives me 6x, and it's going to be 3x. And negative 2 times negative 1 gives me positive 2. Now, the reason I had to make this one negative is so that my two parentheses would match. Okay, if they don't match, go back and try to refactor them a different way. Okay, these have to match. You see that this and this are the same. You know that one. So write down my 3x minus 1. Okay, and here are my remainders. There's the 3x, and there's the minus 2. So again, if I FOIL these, I am going to get this. Try it out. FOIL it. Does it work? As we come to number 39, this is a two-termed polynomial. It has two terms. And the interesting thing about this is it is what we call a difference of squares. Now we talked about this briefly before when we were doing conjugates. Remember, one was plus, one was minus, so the middle term canceled out? That's exactly what we're going to do now. If you have a squared minus b squared, you're going to factor that as a minus b, a plus b. Okay? So the thing about this one is, as you look at 39, you have to determine what a is and what b is. A is going to be x, and b is going to be the square root of 100. What's the square root of 100? 10. So we're going to factor this just by looking at it and knowing this pattern is x minus 10 and x plus 10. And that one's finished. Okay. Now at number 43, can you recognize that one as a difference of squares also? This is a perfect square. And this is a perfect square. So it is a difference of squares. The square root of 9x squared is 3x. And the square root of 25y squared is 5y. So it's going to be 3x minus 5y and 3x